Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, kind of where we started. I'm still surprised watching the Republicans, do the. We've got the press releases. We've got them all ready. It's like carbon copies of the last tragedy. Interestingly, though, the governor of Texas now he was misled about the police response. Misled, given bad information. And this is how I find it always interesting that our Republican friends always default to, our law enforcement people always, they're the courageous ones. No, they protected their kids. They protected themselves. This is where, again, they're smart. They were outgunned. Kind of thinking about, again, it's the guns. Crazy. But again, you look at what's going on and they are so hell-bent on not talking about what the real issue is about, all about deflection. I'm here to share some thoughts on the gun issue. I've asked Brett Pransky to come talk with us. Brett is our executive producer, but also does some incredible writing over at the Courier News, where he's a political analyst and writer. He's got a piece out on Susan Wilde, the U.S. representative here in Pennsylvania, who's a couple hours after the shooting. She's in a room full of constituents talking about what happened. Her opponent, not so much. Brett, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thanks for having me.
So am I getting this right? Susan Wilde, who had a town hall scheduled, walked in, took on the issue head first. And as you write in your article, it'd take another 17 hours before her opponent released her statement.
Yeah, when tragedies like this happen, I like to look around at kind of how different people handle it, how they handle themselves, how they handle, contact with the public. And, it's notable to see any representative walk into a previously scheduled town hall event where there's only going to be one subject, when whatever the previous agenda was going to be entirely hijacked by the news of the day. And yet they go in, they take it on, head on, talk to people, listen to the stories, deal with the emotion. It was quite the event. She live streamed it on her Facebook page and on YouTube, and people were upset, visibly upset. And just seeing how people handle it and then how other people choose not to handle it is, it's a notable thing that I thought deserved a little time.
Now, the other side, you look at all of the Republican candidates and all of the politicians out there. It's all about deflecting away from what is the real issue, and that is our political system's broken, and we're clearly not going to do anything on the gun issue. But it is about that diversion. It is about that deflection.
Yeah, it really is. And that's why you get this kind of boilerplate language that is usually released through social media. Very few times will people step up to a microphone, except for a few people who seem to move towards it. The Ted Cruzes of the world will move towards the microphone because they think it's something that actually helps them, which, is we saw how that turned out. When he was asked a couple of actual real pointed questions, he immediately just bolted out of the room, pitched a little fit and ran off and so on, which is what happens usually when he's challenged by someone who knows what they're doing. But yeah, these responses are becoming ridiculous to the point where it's obvious that there are people out there who simply don't care, but they're not willing to say that. So they keep giving us this thoughts and prayers language over and over and over again. And again, that's what Susan Wilde's opponent did. Actually, she waited till the next morning. She had nothing to say on the day of. And then I think it was like 9 or 9:25 the next morning, she released like a 33 word statement, with literally the boilerplate language, the thoughts and prayers language that we all know is coming. And while I've looked around a little bit, I don't think she said anything since.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Now you bring up Ted Cruz, and Cruz defaulted to jingoism. His official statement in the interview with Sky News that I think you were referring to is because he was asked why are these gun shootings, why are these children being massacred, why is this an American problem, why is this American exceptionalism, why is this, and he took offense to it and defaulted to why is it that people come from all over the world to America, because it's the freest, most prosperous, safest country on earth. He said, stop being a propagandist. And yet that statement, propaganda, because we're not the freest, we're not the most prosperous, and we're not certainly not the safest country on earth. Although, going back to that, that video clip from the TV show several years back, we used to be, and we should be.
Right. And, for example, one stat that comes to mind when he talks about us being the freest nation on earth is that I believe America has somewhere between 4 and 5% of the world's population, but we have over 25% of the world's prisoners. We lead the world in locking people up. So this idea that we're the freest nation in the world is kind of false on its face. The safest place in the world, that again, we're the only country who deals with these issues. It's a legitimate question to ask. It's not even a political question. It's a measure of dead bodies. And it's something that any news organization, whether it's in this country or any other country, should be asking is why is it that this only happens here? And it's not that Ted Cruz, doesn't like the question. He doesn't like the fact that there's only one answer to that question and he can't give it. All right. The answer to the question is we have, a ridiculous number of guns. We have more guns than people. They're easily accessible. And, the NRA, if it had its way, would sell guns in vending machines. I mean, and as long as that's the case, as long as they hold the power that they have and nothing is going to change, then Ted Cruz is going to keep dodging that question because the only real answer to it is an answer he can't give.
Yeah, and in fact, tragically, disgustingly, however you want to put it, today as we speak, the NRA is having their convention in Houston, where Greg Abbott didn't attend, but it's going to send a video message. Donald Trump's spoke. All this stuff is going on like no big deal. They're going to have their gun fetish convention. Their obsession will continue, and again, this issue isn't going to go away. And this is this cycle that continues to happen every time we have one of these shootings. We're outraged, we're angry. There's all this media attention. There's all this outrage, and then there's the thoughts and prayers. There's that. And then you have, some outrage on Twitter and social media. We got to do something. And then nothing gets done. And then we kind of let it go for a while until the next time. And this cycle just continues. In fact, 119 times since 2018. And look, predictably, it's going to happen again.
Yeah, it certainly will. And I've seen a lot of people speaking about this issue in the past several days. And the people who really know what they're doing are incredibly frustrated on the air. You can see it coming out because they know it's going to happen again. They know that there very likely won't be action. There's a bill on the Senate floor right now that we could bring up for a vote at any time we want to, that would increase the number of background checks and provide for universal background checks. It's there. It's already passed the House. If it passes the Senate, Joe Biden would sign it, and that would be that. But they won't bring it to a vote. And again, these are even the politicians on our side because they know it's going to fail. All right. And now, when you talk about urgency and, action and what the people, there's a lot of action going on outside the NRA convention where people have shown up by the tens of thousands to protest what's going on in there. And, people like Beto are there, leading and, and saying the right things about asking people to join hands with them, but also telling them at the same time, if you're not going to join hands with us, we will leave you behind, which I think is the right message. You want to reach out to the people who have been resistant to this message in the past, but you also want to let them know that we're going to keep going regardless, which I think is a great message. But everyone I've heard talking about this is so supremely frustrated by it. And most of them are frustrated because, like us and like me, they don't think anything is going to happen. I don't think anything is going to happen too. After all, Congress just went home.
Yeah. No, if history has shown us anything, we know that nothing's going to happen. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Brett Pransky, writer, political analyst over at Courier News. You want to check out their website, couriernewsroom.com. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at the work that they do. But here, you brought up Beto, and Beto had that moment during the press conference where, look, I think his outrage, I think, him confronting him, was well received. I think people are angry. They want to see some action. I'm curious, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think what most people will think is it's unfortunate, but it's time. Like, I don't think that that getting disruptive is something that we think is a really good thing in and of itself. But when it's necessary, it's necessary. Personally, I think that especially Democrats in the House and Senate, we need to understand that our opposition, which we used to refer to as our patriotic opposition and so on, these people are not operating in good faith. And they haven't been operating in good faith for a long time. Yet our representatives are still operating with a level of decorum that I don't think is appropriate to the situation. These are desperate times, and the situation is really bad, and we're still acting as if the same old rules apply, and we're still, treating people, amicably, as if there are our friends and colleagues, when in most cases they're really not, or at least they're not behaving as such. I personally think it's time for a pretty significant loss in decorum across the board until we start getting the change we need. Because what happens when we're obeying these rules and the other side doesn't, we just look weak. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we look like the team that won't fight. And again, that's already, kind of an anchor hanging on the Democratic Party in the first place, is that they are weak, that they won't fight, that if there is, I think I've heard on the show a number of times, if there's a street fight, a Democrat will hold your coat. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what we're dealing with here. So if we're not going to win, and if nothing is going to happen, which, is very likely the case, we at least have to put up the fight, and we have to fight as hard as we can. We have to let people know that we are fighting, or th're not going to trust us, come November.
So what is, I keep having people go, well, so what's your answer? What's your solution? So we're going to go grab people's guns. And I'm like, no, we're not grabbing everybody's guns. But I think the ones that seem to keep popping up in the news through when these shootings happen, I think that's something to maybe look at. Maybe I'm not the genius here, but there seems to be a common denominator in all of these things. Maybe that's a place to start looking.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find a policy that's going to work across the board, especially when the Second Amendment is in place and it's valued the way it is, and in many cases should be. But I can think of 119, 120 times where grabbing a gun would have been a pretty good idea. So the idea is that we want to respect people's rights, but we also need to find a way to get these weapons out of their hands. And then there's also the idea of assault style weapons. Keep in mind, those cops stayed in the hallway for nearly an hour as little kids died. And the reason they did is because they knew they were outgunned. They knew that, if that was a kid in there with a handgun, or a kid in there with a weapon that wasn't capable of quite the carnage it was capable of, would they have been braver, than waiting for 48 minutes before going in that door? It's very likely they would have been braver had the weapon not been so unbelievably terrible. So the idea that assault weapons may need to go is a pretty good idea too. I mean, it has to do with finding something that the American people can deal with, and that the two sides can come together on. But right now, what we're seeing is, at least one side of the argument is, we have a situation where the issue is more important than the solution.
Yeah, no,
being able to shout at people of being gun grabbers is more important than actually saving lives.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the police waiting, because one of the arguments is, well, we just Newt Gingrich was on fake on the F channel saying, well, we just need to pay those teachers an extra $500 a month, train them to carry the little pea shooters in their desk, because they'll be the ones to take on that shooter, where the police, who are highly trained, didn't. So I'm curious, you as an educator, thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a bad idea. I mean, for any number of different reasons. But I mean, when it comes to arming teachers, what it really is just a fallback position, so we don't have to do anything about guns. That's essentially what it is. Because keep in mind, who they're talking about arming today, they didn't trust yesterday. There's the same people that were demonizing teachers as groomers and predators and all this kind of nasty kind of anti-education stuff that you've been seeing for months now. The stuff that got Glenn Youngkin, elected in Virginia and has become a part of political campaigning ever since. This idea that, they're indoctrinating your children and things like that. So you know what? If they're going to indoctrinate your children, if they're going to groom your children, let's give them a gun so it becomes that much easier. I mean, this argument doesn't make sense. It's never made sense. It's just a way to not talk about guns. It's just a way to not talk about the real problem, which is the existence of these, high capacity death machines, in our schools and in places that they just should not exist. So again, we're going to go back and forth. Teachers are our heroes. Teachers are the problem, and back and forth, because that's how the game is played. And that's essentially what this is. It's all just, to the people making these arguments, it's all just a big game.
Yeah, and again, it's the diversion to get us away from talking about what the real issue is, and that's the frightening part of this, because we're so easily led astray, aren't we?
Yeah, we really are. I mean, it's not hard to divert our attention. Keep in mind, the people who do this are exceedingly good at it. Because at the end of the day, and it's a message I've seen on this show a number of times, what this really is about is creating divisions, is dividing people, especially dividing people who have pretty similar interests. For example, the people sitting in that NRA gun convention and the people outside on the streets protesting probably agree on 98 out of 100 issues in America today. But those two issues are such a big deal. That one issue with guns is such a big issue. You can so easily drive a wedge between them. And so what happens is they never come together. And because they never come together, nothing ever gets done. And by the way, nothing getting done is the goal of the people who are driving this whole thing, which in this case are gun manufacturers. But you can see this model playing out in industry after industry after industry. This is just one of them.
Yeah. And while that happens, we continue to get nothing moving forward. But let me ask you a last line of questioning, because, they say, well, we had Herschel Walker rambling on about, I'm still not sure what exactly his point was, something about having a government agent. I think it was a government agency overseeing young men, looking at women, looking at social media, I'm not quite sure, something about disinformation, something about something.
Right.
But he eventually hit mental illness. And I'm going, well, is that the problem? Was this kid crazy? Are these shooters all crazy? Is there something to that? Could you argue that the people sitting in that hall a couple of days after a mass murder happened, could you say that there's some mental illness fetishizing a gun? I'm curious, thoughts?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I'm not a mental health professional, but it doesn't take one to realize that there is a mental health problem or a mental health component in this. I mean, when you look at the profiles of the shooters, they are typically people who have a severe amount of desperation in their lives, regardless of the many different ways that it can come out. So yeah, I'm sure that mental health is a part of this. But then again, when you look at all the different factors, there are mental health issues no more in America than in any other country percentage-wise. You know what I mean? There are violent video games in America, but not in a greater percentage than other countries. There are, any number of different violence on TV in America, but not in, dramatically different ways than in other places. There's all kinds of different factors that are pretty much the same between us and a lot of other countries who don't have this problem. The one factor that is of dramatic difference between the United States and the countries that don't have this problem is the number of guns that exist in the culture. That is the one thing that is a vast difference between our culture and all these other cultures that don't have these same problems. So, I mean, it's the easiest thing to land on. We should probably start there.
Yeah, it seems like the lowest common denominator seems like the place to start when you have this conversation, and then it should broaden out to all of the other things, because I think we can have a broader conversation than just one thing. Except the things that they keep trying to say, shiny thing over here, come over here. But if you want to check out the work of Brett Pransky and the good folks over at the Courier Newsroom, we'll get links out at social media, how you can do that, couriernewsroom.com, the website. We will get links out. But Brett, I appreciate the time. Great work. Keep it up. Look forward to having you back again real soon.
All right, thanks.
Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you've got questions, comments, something on your mind, I want to hear it. Also, if you miss any of our program, podcast always available wherever you get your favorites, from iTunes to iHeart, Podbean, Stitcher, everywhere in between. And if there's a place that you get yours that we're not, tell us, and we'll make sure it's there. Quick break, right back. Stick around.